Cynthia, thank you so much for being here today. We're so grateful that we get to interview you. I would love if you could introduce yourself.
I'm Cynthia Neale, and I live in New Hampshire and grew up in New York State in the Finger Lakes, the beautiful Finger Lakes. And I thank you so much for inviting me to be on this program to talk about my work. It's really an honor to be able to talk about my work, and it's just something you have to do as an author. You know, many of us just want to hide away and create and be inspired, and the whole addict kind of romantic writer experience, but you have to be out talking about your work. So thank you.
I would love if you could tell us what your books are about.
Well, I have five historical novels and one dessert recipe book with essays and artwork. And the first four historical novels are called the Irish Dresser series. And the first two are young adult books. And there is a character, my Nora McCabe, who comes from Ireland with her family, gets separated from her family on what was known as the coffin ship during the Great Hunger on Gouda Moor, known here as the famine, the Irish famine. And she has an adventure on the ship, and then she's in New York City. And New York City, she is trying to adjust and acclimate and living in Five Points, which were where all the poor immigrants were, especially the Irish, and the Irish were despised. So she's trying to find her way, longs to go back home to Ireland. She meets Walt Whitman. She goes to Barnum's Circus. She's a newsboy, dressed as a newsboy, but she's a news girl. And then the third book is an adult book, and she's an adult, and she is pre-Civil War, and she owns her used clothing store, and she gets involved with the movement, the Young Ireland movement, to free Ireland from Great Britain. So there's a lot of romance, there's a lot of adventure, there's a lot of real historical facts. I research like crazy. And then the last book is called The Irish Milliner. So becomes a hat maker, and this time it's during the time of the Civil War, and she gets involved in the Underground Railroad with abolitionism, and also falls in love with a soldier from the 69th Regiment. And after I wrote these four books, I learned that my great grandmother came from Ireland after the famine, same age as my protagonist, Nora, and that my great grandmother had become a milliner. So it's as if I've been channeling my ancestors in writing these four books. My last book is entirely different setting. It's about an Iroquois woman who actually lived she was born early 1700s, and she lived through the French and Indian War and the American Revolution. And she is Iroquois and French. She's Haudenosaunee, and she leads her people to safety at the end of the American Revolution when General John Sullivan, who led a campaign to destroy all the Iroquois villages because of their alignment. Some of them were aligned with the British, and George Washington had established this campaign. And she leads her people to safety to Fort Niagara in Canada. And she's a remarkable heroine, an unsung heroine who just wanted peace. And she's recorded to have she had gone to Philadelphia before the American Revolution and after with Iroquois chiefs. So she becomes a peacemaker, and she's quite a woman. And I grew up in the area where her namesake is everywhere, but few people have known what she was about. So those are my books. And then you have to have some levity when you write historical fiction. And so I love to bake. And I created this luscious cookbook, Pavlova in a Hat Box. So I think I didn't say the name. The Irish Dresser series, there are four different books. And then my most recent novel that I'm really promoting right now is called Catherine, Queen of the Tumbling Waters.
Amazing. What inspired you to write your books?
Well, some of what I said before, initially I wanted to be a writer since I was 10. And I was an avid reader and always wanted to. I wrote short stories, I wrote poetry. And as far as historical fiction, because I like a lot of genres, different genres to write in, don't have time to write in all of them. And some of them like horror and sci-fi, I like science fiction, but I wouldn't write in them. And fantasy, I feel like life is a fantasy already. And if you're really looking attentive, then these things are happening. So in a way, yeah, there's fantasy in my work. But the characters themselves, the time periods, people have asked, what do you do for a living? And for many years, I would say, I work with the dead. And it's not morbid because our ancestors are so important to us. If we really listen, they're there, and we are the sum of our ancestors. And the past isn't dead, and it's not even past, as William Faulkner said. And I think that with all of these books, and there isn't time to go through all of them, I've had spiritual experiences and writing them, and a lot of research. So I don't negate that and saying, oh, this is some esoteric experience, because once I'm inspired, then there's a lot of work to be done in research and writing. But initially, like dancing in a pub, and because I do Irish dancing, and I was dancing, and it was the time of the commemoration of the Great Hunger, the Irish famine, a number of years ago, 150 years. And so there was a lot going on in the Irish festivals, and cities were trying to educate people about what really happened because it was a political famine. And I was asked as a writer to write a play. And so I was thinking about what I would write, and I also was thinking I'd like to write a book. And as I was dancing, I see a poster of this famous poster that are in a lot of Irish pubs of a dresser, which is comparable to what we know as a china cabinet. And I imagined a child, a young girl, dreaming of food and dreaming of a better life and hiding out in her special refuge, her sanctuary. So the first book came to me that way, The Irish Dresser. And then I didn't know I was going to continue. And then I'd had other experiences, Hope in New York City. And the third book is Nora. Um, the story of a 19th century Irish American woman, and then The Irish Milliner is the last one. So each one I had different, almost paranormal experiences. And then with Catherine, Queen of the Tumbling Waters, every time I would visit home in New York State and I'd walk a trail that is called the Catherine Valley Trail, not every time, but there was a certain time a number of years ago where I had experiences like a voice in my head at her memorial, because the memorial says in Iroquois and in English, all of you always remember this. And I'd say, remember what? What do we know? And there was this strong voice in my head, write my story. And at the time I was writing my third book, and I said, I can't. I said it aloud, I said, I can't write your story. And why would I want to tackle such a story about a Native American woman that so few people know about, and the research, and being a white woman. Although at the time of my book tour that I went on this past May in New York and Pennsylvania, family came through and sent a photo and talked about my great grandmother being from Pennsylvania and being Native American. And, of course, we don't have any proof, but we have a lot of photos. And I think, well, Catherine's been with me through all these times. I mean, waking up as I was visiting, and then waking up in the morning after I had this voice in my head, the night before, pulling a book off a shelf about the Iroquois and reading about the three sisters, which are the corn, beans, and squash. And I'm reading about them, and I fall asleep. And in the morning, I wake up and I'm making the bed, and there's a big old dry kernel of corn in the bed. Well, it was May. It wasn't autumn when everyone hangs corn husks on the wall. So these kind of experiences have just been profound. I've found dried kernels of corn everywhere where, not everywhere, but many different places during times when I was completely discouraged about writing this book. So there are many more experiences like this, and I think they're important because the work is so laborious to research, even though it's thrilling as well, but it's so laborious that you really have to have that true inspiration.
Amazing. When you were writing your books, who were you thinking of when it comes to who your books are for?
Okay, this is where I am very different from other authors. I think that, it would be more common sense I would have more common sense if I actually thought about the marketplace. And I haven't been. I'm somewhat of a dreamer. I was a paralegal and I worked in that field, but when it comes to creating art, I am a dreamer, and I don't think of an audience until after I've actually written my books. I listen. I really, really listen. I research and I write and I write and I rewrite. And I don't think of the marketing until after. And then it's very important. And I think this is a bit unsavvy, but I'm not after savvy. I'm after the intensity of the voices and the stories of the past that have brought me to them, and they are profound experiences. And if contemporary, I'm listening hard for truth. I'm listening for what's real. I'm not looking at the fickle market. And I'm all about merit and quality and the richness and wisdom of stories, and not about my name being in lights and making a lot of money, because most writers don't. But that said, marketing and promotion is very, very important. And so I think the inspiration and just going with it, and then you have to take courses, talk to people, put some money into it, even to learn about the marketing and promoting.
Amazing. How long have you been writing and what made you really sit down and start?
Well, I've been writing since age 10. As I said, I would go around and I grew up in a time in a very small town in upstate New York. I'm in my 60s. There were, of course, other towns that were larger all around us. They had libraries. My mom was single, and there were six of us kids. And oftentimes she had to wait for someone to take her grocery shopping in places. So we had a bookmobile that came into town. And that bookmobile was my lifeline, besides the waterfalls and the woods and everything else around the Finger Lakes in New York. And so I read voraciously. And at age 10, I said, I'm going to be a writer. And of course, that's just, writing some poems, and only your family love it. Love your writing. Seriously, I started writing. I worked as a freelance writer. I was an English major. I got my degree in writing and literature, and I started doing freelance writing just to make a living. I knew I didn't really want to teach. I thought it would take up too much time in being able to write my own work. And so my husband and I had agreed, this is what I'm going to do. I had a tea catering business and baked and did that kind of thing, was a fitness instructor, but I started seriously writing when I was in my 30s, but I always wrote since the age of 10.
Love that. What is your schedule like when you are writing a book?
Well, when I was younger, a lot of it, because I raised my daughter and took care of a home and was working part-time here and there. And so I would work into the night, and for a number of years, morning is the best. After getting some exercise and coffee and then really going into it and trying to focus, I have to learn to focus. I'm probably, in my day as a child, I would have been diagnosed with ADHD, but I've learned to really focus. And so I do that in the morning, but there are times that I will, take a break and I go in the kitchen, I bake, and then go back to it later in the afternoon, and I will work sometimes right through until late dinner, 8 or 9.
Amazing. What do you need in your writing space to help you stay focused?
Well, I need quiet. I need to listen to those voices. and it's very important to have quiet. I can't have music with lyrics. Sometimes I will have instrumental music, but even then it can create moods that I don't want while I'm writing because I only want the mood of my characters and the story. But I do need quiet for that. I have an office off my bedroom, and I have a window, and there's a beautiful pine tree that I call my sentinel. And I take breaks and I see the birds in that. And I have my Maine Coon cat that is always nearby, and that's important. And the light from the window.
Love that. What is your favorite writing snack and drink?
Oh, well, I'm a baker, so I would say having a scone for late morning. And I usually drink tea during the day. I have some coffee. I've cut back a little bit on the coffee, but I will have in the afternoon, go for a walk. And then sometimes if I'm working into the night, a little red wine, just finishing up my writing is really good.
Love that. What type of books do you personally enjoy reading?
I like reading, of course, historical fiction the most. And I like reading poetry, and I like a lot of nonfiction books. Of course, I read them for my research, but nature essays, spiritual books, self-help, biographies I love, and I do like some contemporary fiction, but mostly historical fiction.
Amazing. Are there any books or authors that inspired you to become a writer?
Well, I have to say Louisa May Alcott, Little Women, and I've read all of her books. And when we moved to New England and I went to Massachusetts and I went to her home and touched her writing desk, and it was incredible because she really inspired me, and her struggle, wrapping up her handwritten manuscript in paper and twine and sending it off to different publishers. Charles Dickens, the Bronte sisters, D.H. Lawrence, many of the classics, even Madeleine L'Engle, even though she's more science fiction, she's light science fiction. I really liked her. So they inspired me.
Love that. What books did you grow up reading? Did you have an all-time favorite?
Well, all the Louisa May Alcott books and all the Charles Dickens books. I mean, I even read Little Men, and when you're younger, yeah, when I was really young, of course, Nancy Drew, and that dates me, but Nancy Drew was great for young girl readers. And interestingly, too, my mom, was struggling. She was an incredible cookie mom, raising a single mom, raising all of us. And her luxury was joining a book club. So we did have the bookmobile, but she joined a book club. So she'd get all these books. It was for her. Um, there were just a few for us, but they were really for her. And of course, I would read them even as a teenager. And I remember reading a book, Malcolm X, and that really transported me into a different world than my own in a small town farming community to understand the civil rights movement and racism. And I also read all Ernest Hemingway's books, which I think he writes sparsely. He's a minimalist, and I don't care for his writing now, although I can appreciate him, and he's definitely in the classics. But his writing really, I think it really taught me how to write well as far as grammar and structure and plot. So there were the ones that influenced me during that time as a teenager and young adult.
Amazing. On the other side of that, now as an adult, what are your favorite series or authors that if they come out with something, you automatically grab it?
Okay, well, right off the bat, Marie Benedict. And she has a pseudonym as well. She's a lawyer, and she writes about women of history mostly, who have either been ignored, like the other Einstein's wife, who was she was a physicist herself, but she has garnered little attention. um, Everybody knows Hedy Lamarr as an actress, but she was also a scientist and contributed to what we use in our cell phones now. So Marie Benedict writes historical fiction and mostly about women. The personal librarian, J.P. Morgan. It's called A Personal Librarian. So she's my, right now, for the last couple years, I've been reading her books, and I worry there's not going to be another one. Barbara Kingsolver. She is excellent, and she wrote her latest, and I believe she won a Pulitzer for Demon Copperhead. Willa Cather, I'm rereading. She is the most beautiful lyrical writing, and I'm rereading My Antonia, and I reread the Song of the Lark. Her her work is nobody writes like that today. It's just beautiful. Um, who is Anthony Doerr? I believe All the Light We Cannot See. I'm trying to, take time to read. I love that book, and I've read one other, and I'd like to read the rest of his books. And a good friend I'd like to mention now, Haviva Nur David, who is in Israel, and she's in Galilee, and she has actually been involved in the peace movement with Arabs and Jews, and she writes fiction, contemporary, one called Hope Valley to Die in Secret. And I'm especially thinking of her during these times. I love her work. I love her writing.
Amazing. What would you tell someone just starting out with reading again?
Well, reading, there's so much. Even if you don't have a focus problem, ADHD, you'd go crazy. There's so much out there, and it's hard to know what is good. Don't just go to the New York Times bestsellers. You really try to read the synopses, really try to read reviews of real people, and not just the editorial reviews. And be brave. Take your device, lock it away, because you get to go to places you may never get to go. And your life, it can be enriched, you're entertained, and you want to walk away from that book that will change you and delight you, unless you want to read a book just for fun. But I think most of the books that I read and people should read should be books that really enlighten you and inspire you and change you.
On the other side of that, what would you tell someone just starting to write their own book?
Oh, there's a lot to say about that. I have worked and mentored some young writers. There's a wonderful quote that I've used for years and always go back to it for myself. Better to write for yourself and have no public than to write for the public and lose yourself. And this is by Cyril Connolly. Find your voice and recognize that it seems very romantic. And I think especially during the pandemic, everyone wanted to write and they had the time. And everyone should write. Everyone should do a journal. Everyone should leave writing for the next generation and for yourself, for self-care, for understanding yourself. But not everyone should try to get published. Honestly, you shouldn't. It's very difficult, and you may not be that writer. You should get published, but you should write. It's not that romantic. There's an old quote, it's been around for a long time. They don't even know exactly who coined it exactly, but there's one version is writing is easy, sarcasm. All you do is stare at a blank sheet of paper until drops of blood fall on your forehead, come from your forehead. That sounds gruesome, but you know what? It really is. But at the same time, when you get it right, when you hit that sweet spot, it's like a deep meditation. It's like connecting to your soul, and in historical fiction, connecting to the past and your ancestors. And it's absolutely thrilling. And when you've done and a book is published and people are enjoying it, and they're telling you, this did something to me, this opened me up, this helped me understand, and you even reread your work, you stand back and say, there is something in the soul that writes other than your mind. Your soul has to be a part of it. And there's something with the ancestors influencing you.
What's one thing that people are generally surprised to find out about you?
Oh, that I can curse like a sailor, but that's not something I'm proud of.
Is there anything you would like to say or add?
Well, I think that having the passion to write, and as I said, to be inspired, it's kind of crude, but to say, if you're going to be a writer, if you're going to be a published writer, um, do it with all you have and all your gusto, and do your homework and take courses and join groups and find your own voice in it. Walk away from all the voices after a while, find your own. um, and don't stop, and persevere and take breaks and have something else. I oil paint. I am in nature a lot. I hike, I dance, I bake. And my cookbook, when you bake, it's instant gratification because really when you write, good work takes time. And it doesn't happen, I don't like the nano work or whatever it is, write a book in a month. Of course, you could get the horror of that, which is good, and then you got to work on it, but it takes time. And when you go and you do something like baking, it's instant gratification. And when you think about it, baking, it's like you have to have good ingredients for it to taste good. You have to have good ingredients in a novel. So I'd like to leave people with that. And here's another quote. I love quotes. They're always with me. Writing is an affair of yearning for great voyages and hauling on frayed ropes. Israel Schenker.
Where's the best place for readers to find your books? I know some love signed copies. Is that an option and the best place to connect with you?
Best place to connect with me would be through my website, www.cynthianeale.com. Otherwise, it would be Facebook. Just look up my name, Cynthia Neale. And also, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram. I think I have a blog, Tell It Slant, I think you just look up Cynthia Neale, Neale, and Tell It Slant. I'm on Goodreads as well. And I can mail signed copies. And you can communicate with me through my website.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for being here today. We're so grateful that we got to interview you. We'll be sure to drop those links in the show notes. And again, thank you so much.
Thank you, Courtney. I appreciate it. Have a lovely day.